Hey, this is 6 Bolt von Doom's Lab. This video is going to be the first video in a set of technical support. So, as many people know, I cannot do technical support for Hook of the Reaper, and there's kind of many reasons why, and I'll have kind of another video explaining why there's no technical support. I can't give technical support when help people out. So I thought I would create videos for all the big issues I see all the time. So then when somebody asks, I can just send them a link to here with the videos going over the problem. So then it will help out people. So hopefully I can create these technical support videos and help people out. But actually, the bug I'm going to be going over is actually the bug why I had to stop giving out technical support, because it was taking up so much of my time. And this bug I call DemulShooter turned green, but recoil's not working. Hook of the Reaper bug. So what happened is people, start up a game with TecknoParrot. They start DemulShooter. DemulShooter will turn green, and then, then Hook of the Reaper will say, hey, it connected to DemulShooter. Here's a list of the outputs. But no recoil will happen. So none of the stuff with Hook of the Reaper works. So, of course, people are like, oh, well, since it turned green, it's a Hook of the Reaper problem, and its recoil is not working. And I always thought, I should just put a green light with Hook of the Reaper. Then, I always wonder is that people people blow people's minds. They're like, oh my God, DemulShooter's green, Hook of the Reaper's green. What do I do? But it's always kind of funny. And it's just like, I had one person actually is like, no, you don't understand. It's like, hold on, it's like, and he sent me a picture of DemulShooter's light turning green. It's like, DemulShooter is turning green, and there's no recoil. I'm like, yes, I know that, but because it turns green, is that a guarantee that DemulShooter is putting the outputs? And they're like, no. But that's kind of getting more into it. So how did this what do I think in the beginning, where this come from? And I think a lot of it was because Hook of the Reaper was a lot easier than MAME Hooker, and a lot of the people who never set up force feedback, were setting things up for the first time. So they thought, and people didn't, I don't think, fully understood what DemulShooter did. And I think people just thought it just did outputs, and that's it, right? You have TecknoParrot that starts the game and does inputs, then DemulShooter does the outputs, then Hook of the Reaper, takes the outputs and sends the command to the light gun to do the force feedback. So people just thought, hey, DemulShooter's just outputs. That's all it did. But no, I mean, DemulShooter does actually a lot more. In some cases, it can run the game, the inputs and outputs. In some cases, it will do the inputs and outputs, and in some cases, it will just do the outputs. It kind of depends on the game that's running. So because it can do inputs and outputs, so when you have TecknoParrot that's starting the game and does inputs, then you have DemulShooter that can do inputs. Okay, then that can cause a problem, right? Because they're both trying to do inputs. But it seems like it's getting better now. So when this was happening at the beginning of the year, I was getting a lot of people didn't even know DemulShooter even had a wiki. But now people are like, I tell them, oh, I think this is a problem. They're like, oh, wow, where's that in the DemulShooter wiki? And I'm like, oh, wow, it's like, that's great. It's like, so we went from people didn't even know about DemulShooter wiki to now people like, hey, where is this in DemulShooter wiki? So people know about it. So it's getting a lot better now, it seems. So to kind of fix this kind of problem, I think the first thing is to probably do is to see if you're using the no input switch. So you can see here, this when you start DemulShooter, you put no input. So, and some of the problems what happens is that TecknoParrot and DemulShooter are not always synced. For example, I think sometime during the summer of this year of 2025, all of a sudden TecknoParrot updated, and I know for Lindenberg system and I think some other systems, now you had to use the no input switch with DemulShooter where you didn't have to. So people, when that new update came out for TecknoParrot, all of a sudden, like, all the Limburg games and some other games or other systems didn't work correctly because now DemulShooter was trying to do the inputs and was fighting with TecknoParrot, and sometimes the inputs would be DemulShooter, sometimes I think it would be TecknoParrot, and it messed a lot of things up, and no output sometimes would happen. And of course, this kind of always got pushed down on Hook of the Reaper, where everybody's like, I even had people ask me, he's like, well, what's your ETA on this fix? And I'm like, what fix? I'm like, because I think I told people, it's like, yeah, you have to use the no input. That was it. That's fixed it. And people are like, ETA, there's no there, because what they did is they updated TecknoParrot. They didn't update DemulShooter or Hook of the Reaper. And all of a sudden something's not working. And I'm like, so you updated TecknoParrot and not DemulShooter or Hook of the Reaper, and it's Hook of the Reaper's fault? And it's just like, they're like, oh yeah, that kind of doesn't really make too much sense. So we kind of cleared that up, and it's like, okay, a lot of the times you just have to check to use no input. And like I said, I mean, the DemulShooter and TecknoParrot are not always synced up. So a new update could come out from TecknoParrot or even from DemulShooter, and it could change some things. So that's kind of where I was talking about, like, fully knowing what like DemulShooter is doing. So then hey, or is it trying to do inputs? Is it not? And I know that kind of just, I think, happened with some of the PlayStation 3 game on the Namcom, I think it was 357. But that's just going to be a problem because, like I said, they're not kind of synced. But so the first thing I would check if you're seeing this happen, if you're using the no input switch or not, and also probably go to the wiki because it might be updated to say, hey, now you have to use the no input switch or not. Okay, so then the next kind of the big other problem I see with this bug is not all games work with TecknoParrot and DemulShooter. So everybody thinks all the games work with TecknoParrot and DemulShooter working, but there's the games which I call the Unity 64-bit games. So Unity is kind of a game system like Unreal. I think it's Unreal, sorry, through Epic Games. But it's a game engine. And with the 64-bit games, DemulShooter has its own kind of backdoor using DLL files. And I think looking at the files, I know TecknoParrot kind of uses the same kind of way in. So they're both trying to use the same inputs. So if you can't, so for these games, for these Unity 64-bit games, you can't use TecknoParrot and DemulShooter together. So pretty much you have two choices. You can use TecknoParrot without DemulShooter and Hook of the Reaper. So you just use TecknoParrot. Then the second option is to use TecknoParrot. Second option is to use DemulShooter for the game inputs and outputs. And of course, with the outputs, you can use Hook of the Reaper. Then you can get the force feedback on the light with the light gun, because DemulShooter will output those outputs. But since they're both trying to use the inputs, it can. There is another option. I heard it worked. I never tried it, but I guess there's a way to use all three of them together. So for TecknoParrot, you pretty much just use it for the game to open it and close it, and for the settings. But for TecknoParrot, you leave all the inputs blank. So you have to use DemulShooter for the inputs and outputs. But so that's why you leave everything blank for TecknoParrot. So try to don't put anything input info for the games. Then, like I said, you use DemulShooter. We'll do the inputs, outputs, and since you have outputs, you can do Hook of the Reaper. But I don't know how, because both of them use DLLs to hook into the game and all that. So I don't know if you have to rename files or something like that. Like I said, I never tried it. I only heard that people have gotten it working. So you can try it, and if you get it working, you can probably shoot me an email, then maybe I can update things. But that's all I know is I've heard other people have gotten it working, and kind of you do these things, but I don't know exactly all the details. So, but that's all I know. But for the games, for the Unity 64-bit games that I know of is Tomb Raider, which is always a big one because I know people will file a bug, go, hey, Tomb Raider's not working with TecknoParrot, DemulShooter, and Hook of the Reaper. Then you have Draken, Realm, Keepers, Rabbids, Hollywood, Arcade, and Night Hunter After Dark 2. I think those are the Unity 64-bit games. And like I said, usually you have two choices unless you want to try that other option. Okay, so what if the no input is there and it's not a Unity 64-bit game? Then what? So if it's still not working, the first thing probably you want to do is you can use my program I have called LGTCPTester. Before I go do that, I want to bring up. So this is DemulShooter's Wiki. So this is the Lindbergh system right here, and as you can see here, it talks about to get the game outputs without messing with TecknoParrot. It's using the no input option. So he gives you an example here with no inputs. So that's how you use the no inputs, right? Then, and some of them have them too. But this might be, I think, ring wide. Oh yeah, right here is use no input option to get only outputs for TecknoParrot. So like I said, is understanding, it's like, hey, if I use no input, this is the ring edge too. But if you look at ring wide, it's more, he talks about there's two ways playing the game with TecknoParrot and jconfig. So then he knows jconfig and TecknoParrot are doing the input. So then you don't need the no inputs. But like I said, a new update could happen, things change, but that's kind of system to system based, and you kind of have to know what's happening with that. So I just kind of wanted to show that before I move on to the next one. Okay, so getting back to LGTCPTester program. So what does it do? It logs the outputs from DemulShooter and the other emulator or emulator tools. So then we can look at what outputs are coming into Hook of the Reaper then. So it's found on my GitHub and can be run with DemulShooter and Hook of the Reaper all working together. So you can have this program running with DemulShooter and Hook of the Reaper. So you pretty much start the program, then you can play the game with DemulShooter, TecknoParrot, Hook of the Reaper, or just DemulShooter and Hook of the Reaper. Then once you play the game and I'm guessing there will be no recoil, and you'll get the green light. After all that's done, you close the game, then you open up the log file. So if you open the log file, there's what you see. Usually if it's a setup error, you will just see all DemulShooter's custom outputs. It's only set to their default value at the beginning. So the custom outputs is like P1 CTM recoil, P1 damage, P1 ammo, P1 life. Then you have player 2 with all those. Those are all the DemulShooter custom outputs. And if it's kind of not set up right, you will just have those outputs, set to their default value, which is usually 0 at the beginning, and then they will never change throughout the whole game. But some games will have their kind of normal, genuine game outputs. These are the normal game outputs that they have built in. Sometimes they'll have the recoil, life, and ammo values coming out normally too. And those can change throughout the game. But usually we're always using DemulShooter's custom outputs. So if those custom outputs are not changing in that log file, something didn't get set up right. And then it's not Hook of the Reaper's fault, right? Because Hook of the Reaper is not getting the outputs that it needs. If it doesn't get the outputs, then it doesn't know when to do the recoil. So that's the easy way to say, hey, where is kind of the problem, is to read that log. And if it, like I said, if none of those custom output values are changing, then you messed up somewhere setting up probably DemulShooter. And the best thing is to go back to DemulShooter's wiki and try to see, did I miss a step for this game? Usually, you have to add a file or load up DemulShooter's GUI, or some step. And that's probably the best place to go. And if that doesn't work, and if it's truly a bug, then you can file it with DemulShooter. Or if it's, if you actually find a bug with Hook of the Reaper, then you can file it with Hook of the Reaper. But to this day, 100% of these bugs had nothing to do with Hook of the Reaper. So everyone I've saw to this day has always been a setup issue with, not setting up the game right, or, it's a Unity 64-bit game, or not using the minus no input switch, kind of those things. But yeah, it's always never been a problem with, but never been a problem with Hook of the Reaper. Like I said, it's always, every time I see it's always a setup issue. But hopefully now I've kind of gone over the basics, and now you know what to do if you see this problem or this bug. So if you get the green light and no recoil, then you know what to do. So thanks. Bye.